welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am here with my guest who writes in several different genres and several different for several different audiences, which is a feat that I applaud you for because I can't imagine like how that works for you. You know, like you're writing for adults, you're writing for YA, you're writing contemporary romance, you're writing fantasy. It's really just, again, to me, it's amazing because sometimes I need to just keep my focus in one place. So, Tricia Copeland, I'm going to introduce you. Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Fun
coming.
to be here.
I'm glad to have you. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and just about like where writing came from for you? Because initially, I was like, oh, she's a fantasy author, and then like the more I dug into, I'm like, oh no, wait, like I knew about the fantasy, but there's so much more to it. So, tell us about yourself and just where it all comes together for you.
Right. So my writing journey began about probably like 20 years ago. I was a stay-at-home mom and had three young kids and didn't have a lot of intellectual stimulation. And it was about the time of my 20-year high school reunion. And I was looking back at my life and thinking about the progression of my life. And I decided that I wanted to write this story. And it's my story, but it's a fictionalized story. So when I was a young adult, I had anorexia and got very, very sick and almost died, and then recovered from that disease, thankfully. But it was a very traumatic time in my life, and it was very poignant. My recovery was very poignant for me, very obviously important, because if you don't recover from something like that, it's not good. But looking back at that, I really, I think I just needed to relive it and see like where I'd come from. And also I kind of wanted to, well, when I decided to publish that story, that, I had a manuscript that was like 160,000 words at one point, and I wasn't a writer. Like I'd never written before. I'd done some technical writing, but not fiction writing. So I really didn't know about plot or how to write or character development, or I think a lot of that came in my story naturally. But 160,000 words obviously is like, you need to do something with that. So my friend was an editor and indie published, and she helped me. That became my first two books, Is This Me and If I Could Fly. And that became a series. It became a 4-book series, the Being Me series, that really follows this fictionalized version of my experience from a girl freshman year of college through her senior year in college, and how she develops the disease and then eventually recovers from anorexia. So putting it out there really for me was like to show hope, inspiration for people struggling with eating disorders or mental health issues. I mean, really could be for, someone struggling for because there was depression involved in that, and just a lot of things that were hard to overcome for me as a young adult.
And I think it's really important for people to see that in literature also, because if you're going to frame, like, if you're not going to put it out there, and people don't know that other people are going through it, it's very isolating. So, like I know people would be like, oh, well, you can't frame the college experiences. That it's a really hard time for a lot of people. And I think it's important for us who are able, or rather find the ability to be vulnerable and put that out there, as literature, because if it finds the right person at the right time, that person will hopefully seek help and also feel like, hey, you know what? There is recovery from this. There is something beyond that. So I mean, that's pretty important in my opinion. Um, yeah.
Right. Yeah. My overwhelming feeling at the time when I kind of went into my disease and just, in the beginning steps of getting out of it was that, oh, I ruined my life. This is my life is forever ruined. And I really wanted to show that, hey, you may have this hiccup, you may have this struggle, but there's so much more beyond that. And that, recovery and success is possible.
So from there, how did you get drawn into writing about fae and vampires, and all the supernatural stuff?
Right. Well, fantasy has always been my favorite genre to read. So it was kind of a natural thing for me to say, at, after writing these first four books, I just realized that I loved writing, like the creative process and creating these characters and creating these scenes. I just loved it and I wanted to do more. So the next thing that made sense for me was fantasy writing. And I kind of dipped my toe in. I was invited to write an anthology. And so I dipped my toe in with that. And my editor helped a little bit. She's like, no, this isn't paranormal enough. You need to amp this up a little bit. So my first book was about an experience I had, obviously fictionalized, working in a camp for the blind when I was in college. And so I made these blind characters have these extrasensory powers in the book. Obviously, they did it in real life, but it was cool to think about. And then the next series I wrote, it was intended to be a vampire series, the Kingdom Journal series, but it really became more of a witch and magic series. And that's a 5-book series. And then I needed an army to help the witches. And so I thought, oh, who's going to help the witches but the fairies? And then that became a whole series unto itself. So all of this, I feel like just like snowballed in my mind and my creative side. And then, in between my fantasies, because even though they are YA fantasies, they're emotional for me to write. Like I have to put these characters in peril. They get in situations where they might die and they lose some of their friends and they lose people. And so that was really, I get so entrenched with these characters, it's hard for me. So then I think, I'm going to give my mind a break and I'm going to write contemporary romance where the worst thing that could happen is your boyfriend breaks up with you.
I think what's really interesting, just in general, is how, like the old adage, write what you know, is sometimes feels disingenuous if you want to write fantasy or something, because it's like, I don't know any fae. I don't, but I can read mythology. I could work off of that. But I think like what it is, and what I'm getting from you is that it's putting the emotion and putting experience in an extraordinary place when it comes to that.
Definitely. I mean, my books are very character driven, so my ideas usually start with the character. Like in the case of the Fae, I saw an image of a fairy, and I never knew anything about fairies. I never read, I mean, except for like Peter Pan, right? I never, or Midsummer's Night Dream, and I don't even think I'd even seen that play. I just heard of it. But so I never knew anything about fairies, never expected to write fairies. And I saw an image of this fairy, a female fairy, like hunched in a meadow. And I thought, wow, like, and it was just a captivating image. And I thought, what is she doing? Why is she scared? Why does she look anxious? Who is threatening her? Who is she? And so I just kept asking myself all these questions. And her life grew out of that. She's a princess who's lost all of her siblings, so she's the only one left to take the crown. And when she's handed the crown, she's the first female monarch in her realm. So you have a lot of those challenges with, the old guard of male monarchs who are like, whoa, you can't come in here and do this. So, and then, she has an evil witch spirit hunting her, and she has a lot of things to discover and learn and grow and try to figure out in her realm, and if she can make the change that she wants to make, because there are a lot of old ideas that really aren't serving them anymore. So, yeah, it just kind of takes a life of its own.
So how do you switch your mind between like contemporary romance and fantasy? How like is it very difficult for you? Do you use like do you write in a different room in a different part of the day with different music?
I only do one project at a time. So if I'm writing my fantasy book, I'm writing that one book and hopefully writing every day so that it stays fresh in my mind and keeps the project going. So I will finish writing, do the editing process with my editor, and then finish that complete work entirely before I move on and switch to then writing a romance. So that way I keep them completely separate. I'm not messing up tense or voice or anything like that. Yeah, it would be hard for me to switch in the same day or even probably in the same week between those genres.
So when you say that your work is character driven, first of all, I love that because to me that says that there's a lot of that your characters might sometimes fight you a little bit for the story. Would you say that that's kind of how it happens? Like, has there ever been a character that just will not do what you want them to do?
There's definitely been that character in the Kingdom Journals. I had planned out the second book is Kingdom of Darkness, and the main character, she's just discovering that she might be a witch or she has these magical powers, and there's this boy there with her, teenage boy, and they're at this camp. And I had decided that he was going to be the villain. He was going to be on the bad side. But he was so good at even faking me out that he was really nice that I ended up making him nice. I ended up having other people be the real villains. And then he got his own novel, like he got his own witch story after that. So he definitely was one that kind of took me by surprise, and I couldn't make him an evil character.
I I'm curious with your characters driving so much of your story. Do you ever get surprised by your own plot?
I do. When I started the Fae Fantasy series, we have a love interest in the beginning, and I had really intended for that. I shouldn't give too much away, but we have several love interests that come in and out of her life, and she has to make some hard choices, and some choices are made for her, and some of those hurt me very deeply. So it was and I think in the end, a lot of my readers were a little like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. But I don't know. I had the idea where I wanted to end the series. So I had to make those hard choices of taking some people out of people's lives sometimes. Yeah.
It sounds very difficult, but I think like, and as a reader, especially when you're reading something fantastical, you're immediately asking your reader, and the reader is immediately agreeing to suspend disbelief. So, like when something like that happens organically for the writer, the reader feels it. Like it feels, even if it's like, well, this wasn't what I intended, it's just sort of the natural flow of things. And I think it's just makes for such a good reading experience because we're as surprised as you are.
Right. And sometimes I write myself into corners too. Like I had these rules for the fantasy world, or the Kingdom Journals and Realm Chronicles, the witches and the Fae really is a crossover series. So we have the main antagonist from the Kingdom Journals still, I guess, still being the antagonist in the Realm Chronicles book. I don't know the other word for that, but anyway. So yeah, and I had the premise that no soul could ever be destroyed. So you have this evil witch soul. How do you get rid of her? Like, I mean, I I thought, well, because really what you usually want and what readers usually want is for the antagonist to be completely destroyed, right? But then I'd already set this up where all souls are eternal. So that was like a quandary that I had to figure out how to fix that. And in an epic way, right? You want it to be epic when you go up against like the major battle of going up against the enemy. So I hope I did that. I think my none of my readers have come back and said, "Oh, that was ho hum." So yeah.
Uh, I mean, I can tell you really enjoy the writing process. And working with with fairies and vampires and witches, is there a facet of mythology you haven't touched yet, but you're interested in writing?
I am. I have a character right now, and she's a Nyx character. So it's a half hybrid fish character. So she can change between a fish and a person. And I've written a short story about her, Brynja. And I have some ideas for a full-length novel, but want to really flush out like what the backstory is, what the history of the Nyx is. And she Brynja, this character, was in the finale of the Realm Chronicles series to be a Fae. So that was fun because I brought in like 12 different like fantastical beings in that finale. So I have like all those characters to kind of being springboard boards for crossover series or related series or in the same world, but I need to create, it takes a while for me to create those backstories and those histories of those people. So you really know like who they are, what their struggles have been, what their struggles are now, and where they're going in the future. So it takes a bit for me to like write all it down and have all that in my head before I even start writing chapter one.
Well, I am also curious about you write in first person. Were you always writing in first person, like even when you started your first story? And what about that particular tense really works for you? Like, how does it, really like work for you for getting the story out?
Right. I really like first person because you're in that person's head. You're feeling, hopefully feeling what they're feeling, and they can tell you what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. That was just very natural for me to write that way. I have done like one or two short stories in third person, and it's been harder for me to it's just a different way of writing. I think some authors do certain ways of writing more naturally for them. Maybe their brain thinks that way. Maybe they just like that tense. I like being up close and personal with my characters. I pretty much am my character when I'm writing my character because I want to see things through their eyes and how they would react. And I don't know if it'd be a lot more work to write in third person because then you're 5 or 10 different characters. But yeah, I think it's just a personal choice, and I read that way mostly too. So maybe that's how I enjoy reading. So that's how I enjoy writing.
Do you let your family read your stories before they go out?
I would love for my family to read my stories. My teenagers refuse to read my books. And my husband, I think, read one or two of them. The one he likes sci-fi, so I have a dystopian kind of sci-fi. I let him read that one, and he said, but they had to switch character names because they had to go in secret. And he was like, "No, you switch the character names, I'm out. I can't do it." I'm like, "What? It doesn't seem that hard to me." But he was out. So yeah, if they pick them up at some point, and it's funny because they'll be like, "No, I don't like sci-fi. I don't like fantasy," and I'll catch them reading sci-fi and fantasy. I'm like, "Okay, that's okay."
Well, I think, it's funny because I mean, I guess for them it's like seeing like, a different like side like into your mind. So it could be sort of like this barrier they're not sure they want to step through just yet.
Maybe so, right? And I was writing so much, it's usually in the evening. Well, when I have a job or was with my kids during the day, usually I'm writing in the evenings, a couple hours, and on the weekends. And I was cranking out 3 books a year. So I was writing a lot. And I think they just thought, oh, my obsessed mom, right? So I don't know how they thought of dealing with that side of me. So.
It's funny because, it is like it is like another side of you. Yeah. So had you been a reader, and what did you like to read before you became a writer?
Yeah, I read all my life. I think the first series I remember reading is Dorothy and the Wizard and Oz, the 13-book series where it talks about each different character, the Tin Men and the Scarecrow and all of those things. I love those books. And I also read in high school, like Mary Stewart's Crystal Cave about Marlin and Merlin. I read a lot of like the Knights of the Round Table and those fantasies, obviously Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So I love those like epic fantasies. And then when Twilight came out, that became my vampire obsession. And from there, I started reading almost every vampire book I could get my hands on. So vampires are maybe my favorite fantasy characters.
Thank you so much. So I know that you have your contemporary romances as well. What are you working on at the moment? Like what can readers look forward to?
Right. So I'm working on my perfect romance series, which is that it's a new adult fade to black um, romance series set in the United States, mostly in Kentucky. And then my next book or my newest book will release in June 2026, which is Perfect Secrets set in Denver, which is where I am. So that's fun for me. And right now I'm writing the next book in that series, which hopefully is going to be called My Not So Perfect Cop. So that is fun for me to be starting out. But each book in the series follows a friend in this friend group and kind of their story with their career and their passions, as well as falling in love.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. My guest was
Tricia Copeland. Thank you for having me.
And we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.